All team, give it everything you got.
It's time to fangirl flail with Fangirls Going Rogue.
Count me in.
Never get between a Mandalorian and a weapons package.
This is the way.
News, discussion, and commentary from the female point of view.
You call this a diplomatic solution?
No, I call it aggressive negotiations.
She's as important as he is.
With your hosts, Trisha Barr and Sarah Woloski.
Boy, am I glad to hear your voice.
Strap in, because this is where the fun begins.
I like the sound of that.
Welcome, Yeb Cubs, to Fangirls Going Rogue. I'm one of your hosts, Trisha Barr from Fangirl Blog, and with me, as always, is my bestie in the Force, Sarah Woloski from Skywalking Through Neverland. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. I'm your bestie in the Force, which means that we surround and bind each other or something.
That's right.
That's awesome. I love it. I was just watching the episode of The Mandalorian Season 2 with Ahsoka in it, where she first appears, and she uses that, the Force surrounds us and binds us. I'm like, oh, it's like a lullaby to our ears.
That's just Dave Filoni reinforcing the ideas of Star Wars for the next generation who comes along. And I think that's what we're going to talk about a lot today, because yes, the Bad Batch finale was today as we recorded, but we are not talking about that because we have to take time to absorb it. We're going to talk about Tales of the Empire, which all of you will have absorbed before you watch us or listen to this.
Right.
All of you will have absorbed it before you listen to this, because we want you to. There's a lot of things to discuss. And one of them is that Dave Filoni is again delivering these beautiful nuggets.
Absolutely.
And as you're doing this, hopefully it is your happy Star Wars Day or a little bit after. We want to say that to everybody. Happy May the 4th.
Woohoo!
And I don't know why this hit us since Celebration Anaheim, when we saw the Tales of the Jedi panel. We have just been fascinated with this idea of vignettes in Star Wars, and Tales of the Empire did not disappoint.
Yeah, Tales of the Empire is like a continuation of Tales of the Jedi. It takes two different characters than Tales of the Jedi did and expands upon their stories. And now you can watch them because on May the 4th, they started airing on Disney+. But before we get into that, Trisha, do you have any plans for May the 4th this year?
I do have plans, but I'm very busy. So I feel like my plans got pushed to Friday, May the 3rd, which is to go see The Phantom Menace on the big screen. I believe also The Acolyte has a preview in front of it. So kind of getting my Star Wars vibe on to just go back and remember seeing The Phantom Menace. And my biggest memory of that movie is I had no idea what was going on until the big duel happened. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is Star Wars. Like all of that stuff was like, I don't know what's happening. It's interesting. I think I love Obi-Wan Kenobi. Okay. So that's what I'm doing. But my May the 4th is on May the 3rd. It's just kind of the way life is busy on the weekend.
Okay. Yeah. I too am also going to see The Phantom Menace in theaters on May the 3rd with Richard and some friends. And we're going to do D-box seats. So I'm kind of excited about this.
This is like when you shake and you get the whole other experience.
So imagine the pod race scene. I'm so excited. I can't wait. I'm going to be yelling and screaming at the screen. And as for my memories from that time, I had just graduated high school. And I remember, I feel like I was waiting and waiting until the pod race scene. And then that was exciting. And then I was waiting and waiting. And then the Duel of the Fates was so amazing. And I remember also that throughout the entire movie, I came away with this impression that it was operatic because there was so much opera and vocal voices in the soundtrack. And as you know, I pay attention to the soundtrack a lot, even on first viewing.
The Phantom Menace for me too was the point where I decided to go back to the internet and try to find people to talk to about Star Wars, and got back into fan fiction, started reading the books again. So for me, it's I remember that time. I remember I was, young engineer and just kind of you know, it was so much fun to get back and excited about Star Wars on the big screen because it had been, as we call them, the dark times, right?
Yes.
Where we just had books and it was our imagination. But seeing it on the big screen is like, yeah, it's better than I imagined sometimes.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. But now we get Star Wars on the small screen. We can watch it all the time on Disney Plus. Like, I've been rewatching series Obi-Wan Kenobi and Andor, and of course now Tales of the Empire. So Tales of the Empire is all written by Dave Filoni. So once again, it's these Dave Filoni stories that have been percolating in his head. And they're all directed by veterans, directors of the Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels, and the Bad Batch. Like its names, if you've been paying attention to the credits, you remember. And these stories, there's 3 of them that feature Morgan Elsbeth, who you can see in live action in The Mandalorian and the Ahsoka series, and also Barriss Offee, who you can see in the Clone Wars. And is she in the prequel trilogy?
Yes.
Okay. I was like, wait, okay. I just remember her from the Clone Wars because she's, got that huge arc with Ahsoka.
I think she's just like a bloop.
Okay. Well, yeah. All those women Jedi are bloops in the prequel trilogy.
It's just a little thing. But just this idea of all these little stories that were coming out and, I guess we thought maybe it would be Tales of the Jedi. So I was surprised when they said it was Tales of the Empire. But it didn't disappoint, because I'm not a dark side girl. You're not really a dark side girl either. Teresa, our, longtime founding member, was the dark side member. We are more of the light siders. So I was surprised how much I was drawn to the stories themselves. Cause I was a little bit like Empire. Sometimes I get kind of like,
Well, question, were you drawn to the stories before you saw them, or are you talking about now your first impressions after seeing them?
Well, I was intrigued by the characters that they picked.
Okay.
Particularly. So I wasn't like, oh, I don't want to know about those characters. Like, I don't know. Was there a book about like the seventh sister or something? And I was like, yeah, I don't even want to know.
Got it.
But there's reasons that Barriss is compelling to me and Morgan is very compelling to me. I love the Night Sisters. I mean, it's kind of the weirdest thing that one of the Star Wars books I wrote was called The Dark Side because it's not my thing, which is one of the reasons the Night Sisters is so instrumental in that story. It's like a third of it, that book was, but I had to find a reason that it was compelling for me to write it. So I was like, can I talk about the Night Sisters? And they were like, sure. So, anything with more Night Sisters for me is like, let's do it.
Yeah, and I think you and I are on the same page with Night Sisters because they're witches. We love witches. Like it's all that WandaVision, that Agatha, that Night Sisters, and then for us it's also an EU thing because the Night Sisters originally came from those novels back in the dark times. The Courtship of Princess Leia, I believe, was where they were introduced. Yeah.
Does Han Solo still own Dathomir?
I don't know. It's not Prince Isidore, that's for sure. So what I love about these tales, at first, hearing about them, I was definitely intrigued more about Morgan Elsbeth because of the Night Sister connection, because she seems such an interesting character that we didn't know much about, and because of her connection to Thrawn, which is one of my favorite characters. So she was the more compelling one going into this, but I feel like these tales episodes really work when they take 2 characters that have something similar about each other and then studies how each takes a different path based on who they are and what they choose to do. And that's what, your path is. It's all about your choices, right? And they talk about this, like these are resonating themes. So like in these series, Morgan and Barriss are both just at the lowest of low in their first episodes. Barriss is imprisoned. She's been forsaken by the Jedi Order. Morgan has her whole clan slaughtered by Grievous and his company. And so they are both alone and they each follow a different path. So Morgan, her path is set by the titles of these episodes, which I love. They have the path of fear, right? That's the first one. And that leads to anger, the path of anger. And then that leads to hate, the path of hate. And then, of course, to suffering. Now, we don't get to see that suffering episode, but we see everyone suffering around her, right? By the end of these, of her.
Well, it ends in suffering. I
Yes.
mean, the poor ambassador, New Republic ambassador, is just like crispied. There is no more suffering than being. To me, it was kind of like, wow, they really went there. Like she was like Anakin crispied,
Yeah.
and that is suffering. But it does. I think it's a cool transition too because it opens the fourth episode is Barris's, and it opens with her suffering because of her empathy, because she can feel all the Jedi dying in Order 66. So there is sort of this storytelling thing where like you're sitting there thinking of all the things that Yoda said because you're like, what would be the next title? And it isn't that, but it is that. It's very much
Yeah.
in the kind of the meta of it. Like, here's some more suffering.
And
We're
and
just-
you can hear Yoda's voice in your head. Needs to hate, needs to suffering. Right? Oh, it's so terrible. But then Barris, you know, she chooses to do something different. She does not embrace her fear or her anger. She decides to turn and face more the light and kind of turn back to being a Jedi, or at least be Jedi-like in her story. So
and
I
that
love
was
that.
implied in the blurb that they were going to take divergent paths, and I felt like we knew Morgan wasn't going to go back to the light side. So, but there was a potential for that. That's one of the reasons I was intrigued by the story itself. Like, how was she going to do it differently? And so that was pretty cool.
Yeah. I also want to bring up another point is I don't think these stories would work quite as good on their own, because here I've watched these twice now, and the second time I really paid attention to the imagery. And I mean, if you look at Morgan, her story begins with fire, like with Grievous coming and, you know, torturing her whole village, and it ends in fire. Like you literally have Morgan walking toward the screen with fire breathing behind her. And Barris, however, she is surrounded by ice a lot. And this, especially, her story ends in that ice cave. She's closed in by ice, but she is at peace, for better or for worse. Like, I don't think she's dead necessarily, even though they showed her breath like stop. Yeah, but she's at peace. Morgan's face is tortured. And also, I found it interesting that, like, in the Barris story, in that final episode, when they're in their peaceful little cave and she's trying to help that baby, the candles blow out in her cave, and that signals danger is coming, because she looks out and it's the fourth sister, whatever the sister is. Yeah.
Yes,
But
Lynn.
yeah. So like in Barris's story, the opposite is true. The candles go out, the fire goes out, and that means danger. So wow. Very interesting.
They were definitely like channeling some stuff. Now, Dave Filoni did he's got story by credit, but there actually were screenwriters who were given these stories. But we did learn in the interviews that we will talk about, that we got to do, that Dave did do the voice recording with the actors. So I thought that was an interesting bit of information. So these episodes are what? I think it takes you about an hour to watch the whole thing from start to finish.
They're 12 to 15 minutes each. So
It wouldn't have taken that long to record everything he needed to do. It was probably a couple days worth of work, but I felt like he really wanted to impress certain things and draw certain things out of both characters. So he was there. So he let people do the crafting of the script itself, but went in to record, and you can see his hand all in the way things are visually, and also the way the actors themselves portray the characters.
Definitely.
Some of the tightest storytelling. And so with what you said, I definitely recommend watching it again. Watch it one time and then watch it again, because as you said, they're working together, and you kind of do need to see Morgan's first, the way they laid it out. But once you've watched all of it through and then you go back, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now it makes sense.
Yeah, or there's just lots of little things you notice on that second watch that you just didn't on the first time because you're just gathering the story. So yeah, I love it.
And one of the other things, just noting that there's so many ties to Kenobi, the prequel trilogy, the expanded universe got so much love in this show.
Yeah.
Crazy. The Clone Wars, obviously with Barriss, and then Ahsoka. As you mentioned, you went back and watched. You were watching The Mandalorian, so there's also a tie there to that episode, The Jedi. I mean, we
Mhm.
essentially, I think we're somewhere right before that.
Yeah,
That
like right
is
before,
happening.
because the forest has been burned at that point.
And
Like,
it
and it
doesn't
seems
appear to be in a state of recovery. Like,
no,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely looks like it has just burned. So she's burned it all down. So yeah. Oh, and well, we'll talk about that when we get to that episode. So is there anything you want to do overall, like any more overall thoughts before we get into each episode?
There's one more thing that I want to bring up because the two stories, when you're talking about interconnectivity, are so powerful in the theme of the mother, which was in the Tales of the Jedi also. And we did get to talk to Diana Lee Inosanto and Meredith Salinger, who are the voices of Morgan and Barriss, respectively. And so I was like, I wanted to ask a question about this mother theme that was happening. So I got to ask Meredith. You never know in these panels how it's going to work out, if you're going to get to ask a question or if you get to ask the one. But we've talked so much about how fathers are so influential in Star Wars to the point that mothers were sometimes negated. And so I asked this question, and let's just listen to this answer from Meredith, and then we're going to have our discussion about the whole season.
Yep. What does it mean to you to represent that archetype in Star Wars?
That is the most interesting question. I think when you think of the word mother, you think of someone caring and who takes care of and wants to usher forth goodness in other people, to bring out the best in other people, to provide lessons that teach other people how not to fall into the same mistakes you might have made. I think that's what every mother in real life does and is. And when you think of religion, and there's like Mother Superior, and the word mother isn't just actual familial, but more spiritual. And I think mother implies that people look to you for guidance. And I think when you've had such a complex life and been through so much that Barriss has, I think for her, people looking to her might just be the greatest reward she could ever have.
Yep.
Can I just say, Trisha, that was a very you question. The archetype of the mother, yes. Because I listen, of course, to your Hyperspace Theories podcast, and you're always talking about the archetypes, which I love. So, and I think it's a question they don't often get, so
she liked it, so that's what I like.
Yes. All right. Well, we're going to go through each episode. We're going to touch on storytelling, character, and some music along the way. So, Trisha, let's talk about episode 1, The Path of Fear, in which we see Morgan as a young person, and it's not even voiced by Diana Lee Inosanto at this point. Diana Lee Inosanto voices her mom in this episode, which I found interesting. And this is the one where Grievous comes in and burns her clan to the ground. So what was your impressions? Yeah. Okay.
I'd be scared. That would put fear in me, right? Your mother and your clan, your family die, and they're slaughtered by General Grievous, he was meant to be scary, right? And and the music is very back to the Clone Wars. I loved it. And so just the whole kind of establishing, I felt like I just got sucked back into the Clone Wars. It was just this cool moment.
I agree. And then I also have to say that the gong is back. And if you remember our discussion on Tales of the Jedi, when that title of the episode comes up, we hear this gong, and it is like your call to storytelling. The Kiners are going, "Come, sit by our fire, watch our story."
Children, it's story time.
Yes. I love it. I know, it's so great. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's so cool. And yeah, so Morgan, I just noticed a lot of violin in this episode, this solo violin coming out. And when Morgan, she's recovered and she's with the Mountain Clan, which we'll talk about that in a minute. She is, you just hear the solo violin as she's trying to figure out like what has happened, where she is, what's going on. And later in the episode, we get her full theme with like a bunch of violins. And what I found interesting about this is I went back, like I said, I watched the opening of the Ahsoka series. And when Balin rescues Morgan Elsbeth from the cell, her theme is there. And that theme repeats here and in the credits of these episodes for Morgan. So I thought that's cool. These themes are resonating.
She's important enough to get a theme. So,
yeah.
Right? In Star Wars, not everybody gets a theme, but that's pretty cool. You mentioned the Mountain Clan. I think we have to go there, right? Because
yes, please.
I said Star Wars Expanded Universe got some love, and this is the first bit of love. And Sarah and I both, like, Courtship of Princess Leia was like, when that's all you had and you wanted to see more Han and Leia, that was like the story. And the Night Sisters, and the Night Sisters in the Clone Wars aren't necessarily the same as the Night Sisters in Courtship of Princess Leia. And essentially what we see happen is essentially they're just drawing that out. So we know about the Night Sisters, and then all of a sudden there's the Mountain Clan, and the Mountain Clan is in the Courtship of Princess Leia. So they're just sort of extracting it, saying, well, there may be these other people on this planet that aren't Night Sisters. And that's sort of how we get a little bit of dialogue from the mother of the Mountain Clan.
Yeah, I'm okay. So I need to go read Courtship of Princess Leia again, because I don't remember the Mountain Clan. Do you remember like how they were in that story?
Yeah, they were like one of the kind of the big players in that. So it's like I said, they're not the same. Like they're not the same as in that book. And in that book, the Night Sisters are more kind of like just generally everybody on the planet. And this is making it so that Night Sisters is essentially like a tribe or a clan.
Right.
And they depict that with Morgan's tattoo or whatever that is disappearing. But I thought it was interesting that we know she has a little bit from the show, and perhaps that's one of the things that Dave thought about when he was writing the show, but it doesn't all disappear. So to me, that says storytelling wise that they're not all gone, because the mother of the Mountain Clan saying, the magic of the Night Sisters is all but gone, but it's not. There's still a little bit in Morgan, and that's what she's trying to do all along in Ahsoka.
Okay, so this makes me curious as to what Thrawn and the witches from Peridia are going to find when they return to Dathomir. Like, because I thought that Grievous had wiped them out, all of them, which is what he says in this episode, his little callback. So I'm curious now. I'm like, oh my gosh, Ahsoka season 2, come on.
Well, first of all, we saw Asajj in the Bad Batch. So she was just in that one episode. And to me, I thought, well, perhaps Asajj is back on Dathomir. Maybe she's using it as a camp. And then this brings in another variable, potentially, that the Mountain Clan is there. And one of the kind of nuggets of the story is this idea that Morgan is looking for weapons. And the Mountain Clan doesn't use weapons, and they talk about their path, right? And ultimately at the end, Morgan invites more destruction into the clan by bringing weapons, but the mother proves that she does have magic. She is powerful in a way that doesn't require weapons, that, whatever power in her will work and defend herself. And to me, this is a really powerful way to reintroduce the idea of what the Jedi were supposed to be before they were corrupted into this Jedi Order that's falling in the prequel trilogy. So it's just this idea, they became warriors in the prequel trilogies, that's what they got tricked into, right? And that's what's
Yeah.
happening to Morgan, is she's getting tricked into seeking a weapon. And we see Yoda start to learn that he doesn't need to have a weapon, that you can defend yourself through the Clone Wars, right? As he's looking back at the lessons learned. And so this is kind of this microcosm in this story called Tales of the Empire, what it means to be a Jedi or a person in the light. And the Mountain Mother, I think the daughter, it's her daughter, right? That dies.
Yes, that dies.
She says to her, you were on the right, we're on the right path, what we're doing, because she was tempted away from it and she ends up dying. But if you're looking at it for like kids, or just to be reminded of these ideas and nuggets of what it means to be in the light, that it's right there for Morgan. Like, it's right there for her, and she goes the other way.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, let's bring a clip here from Diana Inosanto, where she answers a question from Mark Newbold of Fantha Tracks, and how Morgan is given this mom character, and how she chooses to use or not use that as a role model.
Yep. Morgan has a tragic past. Definitely has a tragic past. What did you learn about her character that you just didn't realize before from what you see in Tales of the Empire?
What I learned very quickly, if you see that first opening sequence, is as much as there's chaos going on around her, it is truly that this woman not only has the capacity to feel vulnerable, but she also has the capacity to love. And the relationship with her mother, that to me just screamed at me. And to see how she would lose her mother, but yet her mother was a role model to her of sacrifice and being able to defend and protect her daughter, and to be this incredible woman warrior. So that was the kind of role modeling she had from her mother. And I think that kind of role modeling, I realized, helped her survive the rest of her journey through the galaxy. And that's what I learned for myself.
Yep. I think, it's the right question here, is what happens in the absence of this mother figure or parental figure or a wise mentor figure. What happens for her? And she's in this void, right?
Yeah.
And
she has nothing. And instead of choosing to climb out of that void, she digs a deeper pit.
Essentially, yeah. And that's a legit thing that happens to people.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you have tragedy in your life and you just keep going down, right? And it's a struggle. So this is she's very relatable, right? What's happening to her is that can happen to anybody, is that you can just find yourself being dug into a hole. That's why it's important to have connections, and not necessarily, it might not be your parents, but that's what the mother was trying to do. It just, it's not going to work for everybody, that, that they're not always going to listen right away to somebody else, to say, rise above this, or you need to learn a different way. Morgan was raised a certain way. The Night Sisters are a certain way. And I've thought about that way too much because I wrote about it, but I always felt, and I wrote this, that the Night Sisters wanted, and particularly Mother Talzin, wanted power and strength simply to protect her clan. And she dealt with Palpatine and Dooku because she felt like that was the way to protect her. And the Mountain Clan obviously has a different thinking, which makes them this beautiful representation of like the Sith and the Jedi, but not quite as extreme. And so you're seeing it played out on a kind of a planet instead of a galaxy.
Mm-hmm. We must trust our path. This is the mother of the Mountain Clan. Yeah, I love that. Now, also on a second watch, I noticed the imagery that was in this episode. Not only the fire, but if you look, when we go to the Mountain Clan, the mountains are kind of in these grays and muted. The Mountain Clan, they're all dressed in these beige or gray, like very light tones. And Morgan is in this blood red just the whole time, just completely.
She sticks out
from them. She sticks out. Yes. She sticks out. She doesn't fit. And that is represented on screen in every way possible. So I loved that.
It's a cool visual too, because they look way more peaceful in the mountains. Like they look protected and sheltered. And where the Night Sisters live, we just know from the previous storytelling that's a very dangerous place, that forest, the jungle that they live in. And maybe that's made them differently just because of where they live, right? The mountain
Yeah.
people might feel a little bit more secure and safe and have more time to practice, being one with yourself, and living in the jungle is a little more chaotic, potentially a little more dangerous. And that's put them on a certain path.
Definitely. Anything else you
Yeah.
want to say about this one?
No, I mean, it's a great start to it, and you can
Yeah.
totally see how Morgan ends up where she ends up. One little parallel to Tales of the Jedi is they mentioned going on a hunt for
The
in
mountain
this
clan.
one, and
Yes.
there was the hunt scene with the mother in Tales of the Jedi with Ahsoka in the first episode. So I thought that was an interesting parallel. A lot of people think the Jedi are pacifists or should be pacifists, or that was their base. I don't think that's true at all, because mother of the Mount Clan uses some deadly power. This is when we talk about using and looking at it with Barris's story, that it isn't necessarily dark to kill somebody, and we'll talk about when we get there. But it's starting to set that up in this one, right? You have to hunt, you have to kill to survive, and that's part of nature. But it's what your intent is when you're doing it. And that's what they showed with Ahsoka's mother, right?
Yeah.
You're only killing to eat, and you're respecting it, and you're doing it out of respect, and that's a cycle of life. It's when you begin killing for an evil intention or a bad intention that it's bad.
Right. Yeah. Even in Tales of the Jedi, Ahsoka's mom said a prayer.
Yeah.
All right. So should we go down deeper along Morgan's path?
Anger.
The path of anger. Yes. So this is the episode where we see Morgan and Thrawn get together. And also we see Rook. Talk about the EU again. Here we are. We saw Rook. That was a huge, oh my God. And Paleon, who I thought was Admiral Yularen at first. And then later on, Thrawn says, "Oh, Captain Paleon said blah, blah, blah." I was like, oh, of course that's Paleon. Whoops.
And Thrawn.
Yes.
And I mean, it felt like he was going to come, but it was way more like EU than I thought we would get.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I loved this. I especially loved listening to the music here because Thrawn's theme came back. His awesome theme from Star Wars Rebels, which is famously played on an organ. Here it comes back in this little flute. It's like do 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 do. It's so cute, but it's hard to play. It's hard to hear until we get the actual soundtrack because it's underneath Thrawn and Morgan talking all the time. But it's fun. It's introduced as flute, so I thought you'd like that, Trisha.
That whole conversation was like, I was ready for that, and it was so deliberate and precise of why he wanted her. Right? The intention of, you hadn't told the truth. I want you to answer truthfully. And he talks about the construct of the empire. Like, he thinks that governance, this is just like philosophical idea. He thinks that governance by one person who isn't elected, who isn't beholden to politicians, that has the good ideas, the best intentions for everybody, is a legitimate way to govern people. Like, an empire is a legitimate way to do it.
So like Anakin said.
Yes,
Padme.
exactly.
Who's going to make them? You?
Yeah, he's like, we don't need politicians. Like, he's looking for people who think like him, which is, we need to be strong. And that's the answer she gives him is, I want to be strong. And he has some type of similar, we don't know yet, like, reason why he wants to have strength and be able to take care of everybody. And they both talk about weaknesses, right? They're trying to eliminate weaknesses. That's why she's talking about that fighter. It has weaknesses and I want to make it better. And they're like, we don't care if we lose some people. But Thrawn's like, no, you don't want to lose people like that, because then they'll start thinking, hey, you don't care about us.
Okay.
So it's a really interesting way to look at that character. Is he's an evil. I mean, I think he does become evil at some point because he's so into his path. But at this point, he's looking at the Empire as like a way to be strong. And in the expanding universe, he was looking to protect the Chiss from and everybody else from an extra galactic threat.
Right.
And this is the same, I think, a similar type of way he's being baked into the story.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, I loved a great question from Keith from Father Son Galaxy. He asked about that connection between Thrawn and Morgan to Diana. So let's listen what she has to say.
Yep. Thrawn saw something in Morgan. He saw that she was not just smart, but she was tenacious and also in many ways they were outsiders, right? And so they were probably realized that in some ways when you're an outsider trying to navigate the Empire, that could be possibly maybe a weak position, but not for those two. You know, they knew that they both were brilliant, had great minds, and I love that Thrawn wanted to recruit Morgan and bring her into his circle because there was a whole new agenda for Thrawn, right? But also for Morgan wanting inevitably, as we would see in Ahsoka, to restore Dathomir. So yeah, that's what I got from the relationship.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. One of the things I love about Diana is she's just so thoughtful about the storytelling. And I mean, she doesn't have a lot of acting experience. She's a stunt performer, right?
Oh.
And that's kind of why she came in to play Morgan, was because of her physicality, the way she could present the role. And he wanted this really like amazing person who could fight, who could just, and she went for that. Like there's a lot of thought in how she portrays Morgan and they bring it into this animation, but she is like a thinking person. She's very deep. Doesn't surprise me being in martial arts, very centered and focused, which is surprising because she's such a happy, lovely person. She plays this angry woman.
I know. Yeah, she was so like just lovely at the press conference too. Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's so but I love listening to her talk about these things because you could just see how intelligent she is and is thinking about the story. Obviously mentions that Dave gives her some guidance, which helps, but it's not easy to go into a booth and just play the character that you've essentially done everything to play them physically, like, and then all of a sudden it's like, nope, just your voice. You got to do this with just your voice. But she does a great job.
Yeah, I think she really does. And again, we get a parallel here to the Ahsoka series in that at the end of this episode, Thrawn says, "Long live the Empire," with those Star Destroyers coming down out of the sky to the planet Corvus. And Morgan just kind of looks up at them and does not repeat him. Like usually when you say, "Long live the king, long live the king," it's like a call and response, right? Nope, she doesn't say that. And in the Ahsoka series, she kind of whispers under her breath when that same thing happens. She says, "For Dathomir," just very, very pathos, racked in pathos. I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was cool to see Wing from Mandalorian season 2, the Jedi, who's the town leader. We see him tell Mando how to, find her, and he has a recurring role. Like he's in some way this person that everybody in the town looks to. I don't know why they haven't given up on him by the time we get to, like, we don't need your advice anymore.
You're not doing it. You didn't help us then. You're not helping us now. Why do we still look to you? Yeah, I know. Also, okay, I have another question about this town. She's saying, okay, now everyone, you're gonna work for me, you're gonna work. No one is working. Like when you see,
nope, they're all standing around.
They're all standing around this town. Like who's working? I'm so confused by this.
I feel like there's a little bit. It's maybe a little subtle, but because I did think about the dynamic of what they're trying to do. It's sort of like this idea when the town brings in a witch because they want prosperity, they want things to be better. They know she's a witch and they're hoping that she can make it better. And the deal doesn't quite go the way you think it's going to be. And it's very subtle in how it plays out in this story, but it's the same deal that Thrawn is making, right? When he's so desperate, when he's in Ahsoka, that he has to make a deal with the three witches of the three mothers to get out of his situation. So it's sort of paralleling that, but it's a little bit underplayed in this. But by the time I watch it second time, I was like, okay, now I see kind of where that's working from.
Okay, nice.
So maybe they aren't working that hard at that point. They think it's all just the witch giving it to them. And by the time the third episode rolls in, they're like,
Yeah. Uh-oh. Yeah, so let's move on to episode 3, The Path of Hate. When I saw this title go up, I was like, oh boy. So this episode, holy cow. Oh yeah, so this is set after, the Emperor has fallen, and now the New Republic is coming in to, well, at first they say we're going to offer you a place in the New Republic. Oh, but by the way, we're going to take you into custody because you've done some crappy things. I thought that was funny. It sounded like they were going to offer a choice, and then she's like, yeah, come with us. We're going to take you into custody.
Yeah,
So
I don't think so.
yeah, and she was not having it. Instead, she says, my world has been burning since I was a child. And yeah, the fires will continue burning. And then she proceeds to just burn everything down.
Yeah, I was like,
wow,
dude, okay. Like that's symbolic, right? This is like the point where she just is like, no, I'm going all the way. Like, I know what I suffered, but I don't care if other people suffer it too. Like, no. And
right.
Perhaps it being the New Republic and it's not, and Thrawn would be gone at this point, right? He's defeated in Star Wars Rebels. He's gone off with a Purgle, so he's out of the picture. So she is very alone right now, and it pushes her to one step further, which is like, I'm not gonna. And one of the interesting things is, right, she knows the Empire considers coming in to take the resources of the planet, which is one of the reasons Thrawn thinks that the Empire is weak, is that they don't cultivate worlds, that they just harvest them and take stuff and then leave them, and that's going to build rebellions, right?
Yeah.
And so she knows that this planet is some place that would be a resource for them. So by burning it down, the forest, she creates a less desirable planet in this area, right? Because it looks like, so there is some evil in it, but I think there's actually rational thought behind, or things that she rationalizes for why she does what she does.
That makes a lot of sense. And I believe it's in this episode too, she says that I have a vision and I'm going to follow it through. And that's the vision that we see. I think the Night Sisters from Peridia have called to her at this point.
Yep.
Yeah. And so
she thinks she can return Dathomir to the state glory that it is. Yeah. And so you'd have to kind of, I mean, it's a hint here. And in the first episode, the Mountain Clan mother says she's had a vision about Morgan as well. So we see all this like foresight happening. Who knows who's right?
Yeah. Or maybe it's kind of part of the same vision, but just, clouded as visions get.
So were you shocked at the voice on the comlink?
I was. I couldn't tell whose voice it was until the credits. So we were looking at the credits and we're like, wait, Bo-Katan. But now it makes sense because so Bo-Katan, I guess, knows Ahsoka. And so I guess she could see where that comlink was from. And so she sent Ahsoka there. So then when Mando meets Bo-Katan in Mandalorian season 2, she's like, oh, you need a Jedi? Well, I know who to send you to, and I know where she is right now. So it all kind of connects. It's like, holy cow. This is like a map of many strands of spaghetti threads, like connecting together.
Exactly.
All in his head.
I was like, it's going to be Ahsoka. And so I was like listening intently. And then I was like, that's not Ahsoka. Rewind. And then I was like, oh, that's Katie Sackhoff. Okay, that's Bo-Katan. And I was like, okay. And then the credits came on and she was at top billed, obviously, for her one little
I know. Her one little line.
her one little line. She got top billing. That was a surprise. But then, as you noted, not a surprise when you see how the strands are kind of working and where they are. And that's why I think it's pretty easy to deduce we're like snug up on the Mandalorian season 2, the Jedi episode with this one right before it. And I still, again, feel really bad for that poor ambassador. So crispied the fire.
Poor thing. I know. Okay. I want to talk about a moment in this episode that I noticed. And it's right before Morgan decides to burn everything down. When she's faced with this choice to go with the ambassador into custody or not, she looks down at the water around her, which is the opposite of fire, and she sees one of her koi fish, and then she turns and says, kill her. She's like turning away from the water, turning away from nature, and saying, no, burn it to the ground. So
which is completely different from what we see happening in episode 6. It's like you're just
embarrassed.
Like you're screaming, right? It's ice in that episode, but it's water. And I've been talking about the Bad Batch, how the water is all over the place, and they're as like a form of like light side hope. You picked up the hope and the dripping of the water in the Bad Batch, but I think it's right there in that same kind of vein. When she looks into the water, she like kind of looks at hope and is like, beep, just choosing me.
Yeah. Burn everything down to the ground.
And George Lucas, when he was doing the prequel trilogy, talked about this idea of not necessarily good and evil, but thinking of light and dark as selflessness and selfishness. And so she's just choosing herself completely at the expense and cost of everybody else. And so she's encapsulating this idea that George Lucas said when he made the story, that he passed on to Dave Filoni, that she is a dark side because she's selfish to the extreme. So being selfish isn't necessarily evil, but when you go all the way to the extreme, that everything you do is about self and never about anybody else, then you become dark.
Makes sense. So that's the path of hate. So let's turn to Barisafi here and go to episode 4, Devoted. And I was wondering why, like in the timeline of Star Wars, Barris's story happens well before Morgan Elsbeth. But as you mentioned, like they kind of parallel each other, and this episode starts with suffering, which is what hate leads to. So let's talk about so Barris, she's in her prison and she looks across the landscape and it's Order 66. Anakin has basically turned into Darth Vader and is slaughtering children in the Jedi Temple.
And the clone troopers are happy about it. Like, you're lucky you're not one of those Jedi, or you'd be dead too.
Yeah. Oh my God.
For people, like, you just have to think about, what happened with Ahsoka, how she, these two characters were friends and peers. And then at some point, Barris became so disillusioned. And some of this is about showing us in these 3 episodes why she became the person she is. They aren't totally explicit. I would love a book more about her kind of the path and the things that led her to that. But obviously Palpatine was whispering in her ear, just like he was with Anakin, to get her to do things. That's what I believe. He's telling her, she knows that what they're doing is wrong. She doesn't want to kill people. She's a healer. I mean, even in this episode, when she fights the other Jedi, she says, we don't have to do this, right? Like she's not choosing instinctively to kill. And I could see how the choices of the Jedi Order would have pushed her to an extreme, which was she just decided she was going to burn. Like the only way to stop them is just to burn them all down. essentially, to bring him down from the inside. And that isn't necessarily the right way to do it either, but in the situation she was in, I could see how that would be maybe the only answer she saw.
Right. Okay. All right. So you have a question here.
Is there any significance to the number on her prison uniform? There has to be. Anyway, it's 35 and then 528. And I haven't pondered it out yet, but I will eventually. I know somebody will figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. One of those videos might catch it.
So if anybody sees a video that says they've sussed out what that number is, send it our way. It's probably some obscure thing that somebody animating got to do and not a big storytelling thing. But I always look at those type of little details. I'm like, I want to know why that number is that number.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to go back on my word of what I said at the beginning. Barris's story, I remember being intrigued about the possibility of her being inducted into the Inquisitorius, because I did read the book Rise of the Red Blade, and I found it fascinating because it's about this girl who kind of felt out of place as a Jedi. And then Order 66 came, she was inducted into the Inquisitors, and she felt right. She felt at home. And it's a very YA novel in that it's like all her thoughts throughout the whole novel, but it was really intriguing. And then she would have encounters with Darth Vader and things like that. And so I thought it would be cool to see Barris's path into this. Now, we didn't get as much as I thought we would, but we did get, this episode is her induction into the Inquisitorius. And I thought, I mean, even though it's awful and terrible, but the way that they induct you is they make you kill off someone or in order to be an Inquisitor, you have to basically kill.
Well, they're going to be their job. So yeah, I guess you gotta prove that you can do it. And again, that's an important thing. In that moment, she says, we don't have to do this. And he's like, nah, I'm doing it. Like, I'm not dying today. And so ultimately, this is where the two stories become about survival, right? If you're in this point where somebody's going to kill you, is what she did necessarily evil? I think she's just choosing to live in that moment, in an awful situation. And maybe this is because I thought way too much about the Hunger Games, right?
Oh, okay.
The Hunger Games is a story about keeping your humanity in a place where they pit you against people who are your friends and make you kill each other. So this is very much a Hunger Games moment in here where you have to make a choice. And some of the people in the Hunger Games aren't good, but a lot of them are friends and like each other. So here's the point where you have to decide what you're going to do. And are you going to succumb to the system? Which is kind of what Katniss is like going, no, I'm not going to succumb to the system. And Barris has a very similar moment. So yes, there's definitely, to me, I felt like, oh, this is like a Hunger Games moment here.
Yeah. But I didn't equate that, but now that you say it, it's like obvious. It's so obvious.
I thought it was cool too. I mean, we're getting some nods back to Kenobi because their Inquisitor Tower is being built.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought that was neat. And then we saw that location where I think Obi-Wan tried to hide what's her name under his coat.
Yep.
the landing platform area.
Well, they didn't have to. That's a cool thing. You don't have to do concept art, right? You go, that's what that scene's going to be. I don't need a concept artist. That's where that's going to be. And that's where that's going to be. Maybe they recreated that setting where they had to fight. We hadn't seen, but some of the stuff you can save money, right? Because you could just go, they're going to do it there.
Yeah, and also the Inquisitor here teaches Barris to fight without a lightsaber, by reading the thoughts and where they're going to go. Like I played soccer for 10 years and I was a defender. And so I had to be like really good at reading body language. And so you don't look at like where they're looking, you look at where their hips are pointed. And then you know that they're going to like try to fool you. It's like, nope. And I was called the Wall because I was really good at that.
Well, and right, he says don't fight like a Jedi because a Jedi didn't necessarily train to kill.
Yeah.
And when you're fighting
or draw blood
with the intention of killing, it's different, right?
Yeah. Yeah, she embraced her anger and like shoved him into the wall and drew blood, you know, after
I
he,
love that. I love that part because he gets
yeah,
her in the nose and like
yeah,
she's bleeding, and then she's like, "No, I'm going to make you bleed, little buddy," which
yep.
is interesting considering where she goes and what we learn about her kind of alignment with healing and stuff like that. That she draws blood in this episode.
Ah, indeed. Yeah, and I want to note, so we get to see Darth Vader here in this episode, but we don't hear him speak. So they saved on budget by just having his breathing. And at this part, now if you think about it in the timeline, like this is almost right after Anakin has turned into Darth Vader. He's still healing, like he's very skinny Vader, and when he walks into that room, the soundtrack sounds almost like the ruminations, Padme's ruminations from episode 3. It's not exact, but it's very similar instrumentation there, and like a woman's vocalization. So
I know
wow,
when you said that, I went back and listened because that's one of my favorite pieces of music in all of Star Wars is Padme's ruminations. Because if I got George Lucas in a room, this is what I would ask. If I got to ask him one question, what the heck was going on in their brains during Padme's ruminations? Like, what was she thinking? That's the only thing I want to know from that movie. That music just makes me want to go, what's she thinking?
It's what she's feeling, Trisha. It's what she's feeling. That's what the soundtrack is about.
No, Padme's like me, and I know her brain would have been. She's not cycling. She didn't figure it out. She's like, is he really? Is it that bad? It can't be that bad. Yeah, she was spinning.
Okay, I see it. Well, see, you already know. You already figured it out, but that's a good question. So yeah,
Well,
I thought that was a cool connection to the prequels there.
Do you want to talk about episode 5?
Sure. Let's do it.
Realization. Like when I saw that title, I'm like, dude, I know what's happening now.
What did you think would happen?
That she realized that being Inquisitor was not what she wanted to do.
Yeah, after Lynn. So yeah, this is where they go after a Jedi in a village that already looks desolated and desolate. And it's interesting how the pair of them take different paths to the same end. You know, the fourth sister tries to use intimidation, but Barriss makes a connection to
She
the
takes
child.
her helmet off. Right?
Yeah.
And
connects.
she's asking us, like, you know, trying to connect and have empathy. That's what they're trying to show us. This is a very short episode. This is, I think, the shortest one of all of them. And I think it's under 12 minutes. But they're making a really strong point about the character, which is she's trying to connect with people. So when she's up there, she's trying to tell the Jedi, that's what the character's named. I think that's a really interesting idea, that it's just the Jedi, no name. But because it's almost like this is like a meta maybe of several experiences she's had where she's met several Jedi and been in this position, and she doesn't want to kill them. She wants to, you know, change your mind. Maybe what I'm doing is right and you'll feel better and you can live. You can choose to live and do this. And in this experience, which if you had more stories would be over more experiences, she makes a realization, the title of the episode, that
roll credits. Yes.
Yeah, this is not what she wants to do. And this is not what she's devoted to.
Which is the previous episodes.
The previous episode.
Title.
And I think that's one of the most banger lines in all of Star Wars. Then you have one Jedi left to deal with.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like, it's me, bitch.
Essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also found it interesting how the fourth sister, at this point, we'll call her the fourth sister, the way she talks, it sounds like a cult, like they're in a cult, you know. These people, they were already against us. Now those who witness our strength will respect it. It's like, yeah, that's maybe what you were told, but like, yeah, they just saw you murder a bunch of people. They're not going to respect you for that.
and back to your point of these episodes working in concert, is that strength idea is exactly what Morgan has mentioned, and Lynn, the fourth sister, is repeating that sort of mindset of, I need to be strong. That's the only option for me, to be strong in a certain way. And by the end with Barris, we see that strength can be in a different way, which mirrors what the Mountain Clan mother was saying, is that, it doesn't necessarily have to be with picking up weapons. But in this moment, I thought it was just really powerful. Also, for the character of the Jedi, they use the pronoun they and their.
Yes, I definitely noticed that.
And talking about that. So I did go look up who played. It's Rye Chase, and they have on their Instagram says any pronouns. So I think that was very intentional to do that. And I loved it. Made it even more that it could mean that there's like many experiences that have happened in that moment. But I was to me, I thought that scene at the end with the Jedi, of her kind of trying to do this bargaining and then having this realization and storytelling that she's not gonna be an Inquisitor. It's not what she wants to be in her life.
Right.
Yeah. And making a different choice. So,
and she also shows that with her actions, like once Lynn goes off the cliff, or fourth sister goes off the cliff, Barris throws her helmet down, and that helmet was given to her once she was inducted as an Inquisitor. Now she's let go of that helmet, thrown it down, and left that
and
choice.
Sadly, it's something Vader can't do, right?
Yeah.
Taking off his helmet in the Return of the Jedi is like, no, you'll die.
Yeah,
right?
that's
he
true.
Can't live very long without his helmet, his suit, and he's sort of like trapped in this prison of his help. Like, Barris can take it off, Anakin can't. But
well, here, okay, so I have a question then. Do we think she went off with the Jedi then at that point?
Well, she took the Jedi and
right. Oh, and said, I won't let you die, right?
Yeah, I won't let you die. And that's sort of what happens with Lynn in the next episode, essentially parallels that. And whether we want to believe that that's the truth, but what I feel like the story is saying is that Barris saves the Jedi.
Yes.
And it's very kind of, to me, it's like this idea of just parables or fairy tales where you have this character that's iconic. That even in The Mandalorian they did that, right? They call the episode the Jedi. They call the episode the Magistrate or whatever. Like they're talking about archetypes and icons, and so it's all portrayed by one character, but it means more than that one character.
Got it. It's like a myth or a fable, like you said.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I like that. That's a good way of looking at it. I like that a lot. Cool.
And one more thing visually, the tree.
Oh, at the top of the mountain.
Come up a lot with the Force and the Jedi, and in the Mortis arc particularly, right? We have that tree behind when Ahsoka turns bad, and then Anakin has to connect the daughter to Ahsoka to save Ahsoka, and there's
also
the
Jedi Temple. The Jedi Temple has the tree, and that's where they like have the ceremony, like the Jedi ceremonies of becoming a Jedi or a master, right? I think it's right there. Yeah.
So there's that tree with not a lot of leaves, which is what they use to symbolize the Jedi Order is struggling, and it's there in that shot. So I'm just gonna say yes. More teaching more Star Wars iconography. You may not notice it, a kid may not notice it, but maybe.
It's there for us.
Yeah.
It's there for us podcasters.
And I think there was a lot of detail in these episodes. They were short, but mighty in the love of the franchise.
Right. Also, this village that they go to here to hunt the Jedi, it doesn't look burned down, but there's no fire anywhere here. There's no water. There's nothing. Like, it's like this desolate space. Yeah. And I think that's kind of where she made her choice too, is in this place where it wasn't turning her one way or the other. She had to decide for herself.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's-
All right.
Those desert plate locations, they're big on big decisions for characters.
Yeah, no kidding. All right. Well, let's go move on to episode 6, The Way Out. And of course, seeing that title, it's like, okay, I kind of think what's happening here too. So, okay, so why don't you talk about the beginning of this episode here?
Is that cute little creature going to be in the creature stall on BATUU? That's all I want
hope
to know.
so, but there's still no Purgle there, and I have an issue. There's no Batcher. There's no, so I don't know. They haven't been keeping up very, very good.
They're a little slow.
Yeah.
They're a little
they're
slow.
a
But
little
I
slow
vote
to
for
import to BATUU.
I vote for the cute little creature to end up in the creature stall. And by the way, random thing, I saw somebody noted, and they showed it in the creature stall at the other day. They took out every creature and put in the whole place filled with porgs.
Wait, what?
Yeah, at the creature stall in BATUU.
Like someone did that randomly, or they just did that?
Well, Disney
the workers.
parks people did it. They took out every other creature, even in the lock cat cage. They put a porg in there.
What?
And
is
filled
this
the
BATUU East or West?
I think it was West. I'm pretty sure. It was somebody who was Instagramming it. They were like, look what they did. And the whole stall, everything was porgs. Only porgs.
Well, I'm going to be there on May the 4th. So I'm going to check this out.
Maybe it'll still be like that. But I was like, either that or they were just feeling kind of feisty and bored in BATUU. And so, Black Spire Outpost had to do something funny. But I thought it was the funniest thing because they're like, wait, there's only porgs. And then they filmed the loft cat cage and it was only a porg. So
that's weird. Wow.
Maybe they were working on that animatronic and they were like, oh, we need to like explain it or something. I don't know.
The porgs have taken over. They're an invasive species.
Well, they do infest things.
Yes. All right. Well, let's get back to this episode on this ice planet.
We're talking about this really serious episode and I'm talking about porgs. Yeah. Sorry.
Which is, of course, the opposite of fire for Morgan. And I think that's just an awesome storytelling thing. Ever since you started talking about water with the Bad Batch, I've been onto these fire, ice, water imagery. It's fabulous.
Well, you can't unsee it then, right?
Yeah.
Definitely there's like this theme of what they're trying to do. This episode is also about Barriss being called the healer, which is a direct reference to a book that was written about this character, the MedStar I think it was a duology, but it was MedStar Jedi Healer, and it was a book about her being tempted by the dark side, which I think is really interesting based on what we see happen and what she goes through and the choices she has to make in order to decide she wants to be Jedi. So it's not directly this story, but it was one of those little books that not everybody read that I really liked. And I like that the ideas from that book came into this character.
I like that. When did that book come out? Was it early 2000s? I'm assuming
it had to have been. I mean,
right.
It was in that area where people were interested in prequel trilogy characters.
Okay.
And, with some character that wasn't really, they weren't going to worry too much about telling that character's story. I would call it essentially MASH. It's the idea of the show MASH, which I might be dating myself.
No, I get it. Yeah.
But put in Star Wars and they used her as this character. So she was essentially in a MASH unit on a planet during the Clone Wars, and they had limited resources and, things are not going well. And she's trying to save people on this, occupied planet. Yeah.
That's also like one of those episodes of Star Trek we've watched recently. Anyway,
very similar. Yes.
with oh God, what's her name? The new Star Trek Strange New Worlds. But anyway, go ahead. Nurse.
No, so I mean, so there's drawing on some books. I don't think that Dave like read it and wanted to be like, I want to do that, but I think he's really
surprised us before.
Yeah, that's true.
He's taken
was
all
a big
these,
fan, but for some reason it's really kind of grabs onto that. And it wasn't it was, I think, only in paperback, if I remember correctly. And
I never read it, but I was out of the books at that point.
It's a good book, actually. I felt like I liked it. Maybe I was like, oh, there's a female character and she gets to be the lead. But
Yeah.
it was, to me, a story I liked because of the way it sort of mirrored the story of MASH and what it was doing in it, and it's a dark book. There were definitely the prequel trilogy, Shatterpoint, stuff like that about Mace Windu. That was all kind of in that same time. They were all pretty dark, which is what got the expanded universe in trouble a little bit, because everything was dark all the time. We're killing Mara. We're going to kill Anakin.
Yeah.
Jason's going to go dark. Yeah, it was a dark.
Killed Chewie. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh God.
Chewbacca, they dropped the moon on him. I actually, as a storytelling point, I don't think it's a bad idea. It makes the stakes real, right? When you kill the family dog, essentially.
Yeah. That's no good. All right, we keep on getting off track on this one. I don't know why. So now this story begins with a mom and a dad. They're in this snowstorm and they're bringing a baby to this healer character. And so at one point it's mentioned that they say, oh, the traveler, they sent us to you. And so I feel when they use that pronoun, the they, them. So I feel perhaps it's the Jedi from the previous episode. But what do you think?
I think that's a legit guess, based on what we've seen. I also was curious if it could be Voss. I feel like we're getting
Quinlan Voss?
Yeah, Quinlan Voss, who's mentioned in Kenobi but not seen directly, but tying into this idea of the path. And the Bad Batch sort of sets up this idea of like a kind of a survivors network for the clones, which I think is really similar to the idea in Kenobi of a survivors network for Force sensitives and for Jedi. And she's telling them your child is, been tested and they're looking for Force users, and based on the ideas of the old Jedi, which we're challenging in Ahsoka, right? You don't necessarily have to have a high M count to be successful Jedi, but based on those ideas, your child would be a likely candidate to be scooped up and become trained as a Jedi. So therefore, the Empire will probably take your child. So good thing you ran.
You did the right thing in a snowstorm. But then there is an Inquisitor on their path, and it just so happens to be the fourth sister, Lynn, who didn't die. Yeah, our bestie. Yeah. Oh, show was so creepy. Speaking of, that's a connection to the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, because she is in the series as a live action character. Is it the same voice actor?
Yes, it's the same actress. Yep.
Nice. That's awesome. Wow. Cool. Well, is there anything else you want to bring up? You have a lot of fun notes on this.
Well, one, they call her, the attendants, who are the two characters that are with Barriss, call her Wise Mother. So we've now circled back to the mother dies in the first episode, and now we're kind of completing a cycle, seeing a mother arise in the story, which is why I asked the question about mothers in the story and was excited to get to ask Meredith that question. And Morgan, we noted, wants to just like suck the lives out of these people. She doesn't care if she burns their force down, uses them up, and doesn't pay them. She wants to suck the life out of people. And Barriss says to the attendants, like, what, they're like, what should we do? And the family, and she just tells them, you can live, right? And take what you've learned here, what you've seen, and live. And that's like total opposite. Fire and ice. Here, we typically think of ice as more of, we might be dying and freezing, but
right. But at this point, it's the good. It's represented as good versus bad. And well, Lynn, I just thought of this because Lynn gets caught in the cave, the ice cave. And that's basically representing her path. She is trapped. She is trapped in the Inquisitor like inquisitorious. She can't find her way out. And it's Barris who's like, I want to help you find the way out.
And the ice is literally forcing her to look at herself. Like when you talk about character arcs, they have to like look inward and make a different choice. And so the ice is a mirror. She keeps running into herself and looking at her, and Barris has made
cutting herself down.
Yeah, is this who you want to be? Did you intend, when you devoted yourself to be an inquisitor, to kidnap small children?
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that what you wanted to be? Like, think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. So much imagery. I love it. I love it. And this story ends with that creature again, like looking out at
waiting for her to be in the stall. But again, when I talk about the path, they actually use that word in the dialogue. To Lynn, Barris says, "You do not know the path," when she lets her in to chase them. And then, they talk about fear is your master, which is paralleling what happened with Morgan, right? Morgan is the path of fear. And so we're just, it all works together, which is supposed to work that way.
I love that. And I love Barris's when Lynn is saying, fear is my ally, not yours. And Barris sees, it seems fear is not your ally, but your master. And I thought that was a really cool turn of phrase. Speaking of, words that we like in these episodes, I really loved that turn of phrase there. Thought it was great.
And also there's a little bit of a parallel to the themes of Andor, the prison arc, where they say it's one way out is the episode. Mm-hmm. And it's paralleling that ideas where Lynn feels like there's no way out. And Barris actually says that's what they want you to believe, that there's no way out. And that's what is the big breaking point in that Andor arc, is that they finally realize that they don't want you to escape. They aren't going to let you escape. And then when they see that there's a potential path out, they all sort of spill out and make the choice. So it's not like this direct nod, but I think that Tony Gilroy saw the same ideas in the idea of the Empire. And that's what oppressive people want to do to you, is say you're trapped and this is your only choice.
Wow. And speaking of these episodes going full circle, it also does that in the music. So in the first episode with Morgan, she's wakes up in the mountain clan and you hear this solo violin. Well, when Lynn, or the fourth sister, makes her decision to get Barris out, there's this beautiful violin solo happening when she's trying to figure out what's going on. And then when Lynn makes that decision, the music turns from all this minor key that we've been hearing throughout these 6 episodes into this beautiful major key. And it's just this huge shift in tone.
I'm gonna get you out of here.
Oh, I'm getting emotional.
Well, and the visuals of it, she's like walking into the light. Like they make that, like walking into the light. She's just at the edge of the shadow as she's carrying her out. And they're just letting you make that. Okay, she makes it out. So then the question is, do you think Barris is dead?
I don't, because as we've seen, when you get run through by a lightsaber, that doesn't mean what you think it means anymore.
Poor Qui-Gon got screwed, man.
Yeah.
All Obi-Wan had to do was just carry him to a Bacta tank.
Qui-Gon was like, "Uh-oh, I got run through. Oh, I better connect with the living force now. Okay, bye." He left his body too fast.
There has to somebody, I'm sure, is going, Dave, how are you going to explain this? How are you going to explain this? I'm sure he's thought about it, but it's just kind of funny because I'm like, wow. Well, but I mean, we know she's a healer, so she has things in her encampment, I think, to heal. So it makes sense. And that's the implication that Sabine got treated right away. And So therefore, but Obi-Wan
Yes.
was sidetracked by cutting Darth Maul in half, and he didn't get help right away. So
No.
those first 10 minutes are really important if you take CPR course.
I'll take your word for that. Oh my gosh. Wow.
So is there anything else you want to talk about that episode?
No, I think I think we've gone on a journey here.
So the question is, what have you learned from these 6 episodes?
Well, I learned, like, I was connecting the 2 stories, like, kind of 1 to 1 to 1 to 1, but now I see it's a full circle. It's like a ring cycle. And I now I want to watch it again because I think the stories are really fun, and it's not characters that you would expect, but I'm glad we got them.
My thing is I'm going to watch all of them together, like the Tales of the Jedi and the Tales of the Empire. And I feel like we're probably going to get, well, there's 2 things that happen. We could get Tales of the Jedi again, or we could get, and then have them go back and forth, or there's potential we could get like Tales of the Bounty Hunter.
Yeah, or Tales of the Scoundrels, or
see like
hunters.
Fennec and Bo, or maybe a little more Boba Fett or something. Maybe they'll explain why Boba Fett was who he was when we got to the book of Boba Fett. I don't know. There's plenty of opportunities. But anyway, the thing I learned is the point of view from the Empire was as strong a show about the messages of being a Jedi or in the light as the Tales of the Jedi were.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I don't know if it's really Tales of the Empire necessarily, right? It's, like the name, the title.
Yeah, well, they're characters who are affected by the Empire and identify with it at some point. And
that's true. Okay.
But it was curious how it played out, because I was like, wow, this is like just really strong, basic Force Star Wars concepts. Like philosophy, they're like basic myth, and wanting people to understand what Jedi represent, which I felt like was, when you looked at the early Disney launch, was they didn't have a good handle on that. And that's what they needed to do, is say, what do the Jedi represent, and what are we going to do with them? They just sort of like threw a lot of stuff at the wall, and some things attached and some things didn't. But this is saying, this is what George Lucas's idea of Star Wars was, and we're going to sort of replant it in people's minds. They're going to come in with a really strong idea of what that means.
Yeah, I like it. I feel very enlightened. Thank you, Trisha.
So we did dribble out some interview questions, but I feel like you should go listen to the rest of the interviews, and there's some really good questions that are in there. And so we're going to just leave links. If you enjoyed this discussion, you're going to love listening to those 2 ladies talk about their characters. And we'll leave those. If you want to take the deep dive, then you can go for it.
Yeah, we'll leave those in the show notes and on our website, of course.
Yeah.
Nice.
If you want to find other stuff we've done, let's see, there was a lot of Seasons of the Force stuff in both of our timelines. Fangirls Going Rogue, Skywalking Through Neverland, and we do have a Season of the Force priority transmission that I recorded with my Hyperspace Theories co-host PJ Priester. And Sarah, you also have a lot of content on Skywalking for that too, as well, for Season of the Force, if people haven't gone and want to get some idea of how to enjoy it.
Yeah, and if you want to see dancing droids and Sabine and all that, head to our Instagrams. So at Skywalking Pod, at FG Going Rogue, there's a lot of cute stuff there.
I know. I think the droids are like at 100,000 views or something like that.
It's over that. It's like 120,000. It's ridiculous. So thanks, guys. All right. Also, there's some really exciting stuff happening over at the Skywalking Network. So Richard and I are going to be in Ontario, California on May 18th for Comic-Con Revolution. And we're going to do 2 panels there. One is a Star Wars trivia panel. One is I believe, a classic Marvel Star Wars comics panel, but that's also the convention where so many Clone Wars and Rebels voice actors will be, including Ashley Eckstein and Matt Lanter and James Arnold Taylor and so many other fun people that we love. So, and that have been on our show as well. So hopefully we'll get to interface with them and with you guys. And then also on Memorial Day weekend, if you are near Houston, please head to Comic Palooza in Houston. Richard and I are invited as podcast guests to be there. We're going to have a booth. We're going to be doing lots of podcast panels with just ourselves or with other podcasts. And I'm also going to be on one podcast on the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend about women in podcasting. So I think that's
cool.
It's going to be really cool. So
you guys are rocking it.
I know. It's so exciting.
Yes. I love it.
Yeah.
And we will do a discussion on the Bad Batch. As we noted at the beginning of the show, it aired today. We wanted to talk about this. Tales of the Empire, get some celebration for Star Wars Day out there. And the Bad Batch is going to be there for us to enjoy and kind of absorb. There's a lot there. There's a lot
there really
happening.
is.
So.
Yeah. So we'll do an episode. Woo. We'll get it out there for you guys.
All right. So, and I know the Acolyte's coming. At some point, we'll get people together for a Zoom chat and talk about that. So stay tuned for our social media places, which we're going to tell you where to look, and we'll tell you if there's going to be a Zoom chat and when we're going to do it.
That's right. So visit us in between shows over at fangirlsgoingrogue.com. Also on Instagram, see Dancing Droids at FG Going Rogue. Trisha, you are at Fangirl Cantina. I am at Jedi Tink.
You can send us an email, contact@fangirlsgoingrogue.com.
You can also find us on Facebook. Just search Fangirls Going Rogue or join our Facebook group, but you must answer questions to join.
And please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a positive 5-star review. We need your reviews so more people can find us.
So until next time, do. Yub.
Yub. Yub.
This site is not affiliated in any way with Lucasfilm Limited, LLC, the Walt Disney Company, or any of their affiliates or subsidiaries.
Yep.